On an ordinary Tuesday morning in Los Angeles, sirens blended with traffic, and the urban rhythm drowned out nature's whispers. Officer Mercado thought he knew every story these streets could tell. But while patrolling the corner onto Hobart Boulevard, he realized he was being followed by a small, wild animal. Not a stray dog, not a house cat, but a bobcat cub, no more than a few months old, looking thin but curious and unafraid. It moved with deliberate purpose, as if it had been searching for this specific human in uniform. The little cub kept close to Mercado, trailing behind him wherever he walked. When his partner arrived and stunned by the interaction, she recorded the moment and shared it on LAPD's social media. Where had this little bobcat come from? And what desperation or destiny had brought this young bobcat to choose this particular officer? Sometimes the most profound connections come not from the calls we answer, but from the silent pleas we're wise enough to hear. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Los Angeles as Officer Mercado adjusted his radio and stepped out of the patrol car. It was September 15th, another Tuesday in what had been a routine week of patrols through the mid-city district. The air still held the lingering warmth of summer, though autumn was beginning to whisper its arrival through the occasional cool breeze that swept down from the mountains. Officer Mercado had been walking the beat for nearly 12 years, and in that time, he'd seen just about everything the city had to offer. Gang violence, domestic disputes, petty theft, and the occasional heartwarming reunion of lost pets with their families. But nothing quite like what was about to unfold on this ordinary Tuesday morning. His partner, Officer Rosa Tavera, remained in the car, handling paperwork from their previous call, a minor fender bender that had required their attention near Wilshire Boulevard. Mercado preferred these walking patrols. They allowed him to connect with the community in ways that staying in the car simply couldn't match. Children would wave from school buses, elderly residents would nod approvingly from their porches, and local business owners would emerge to chat about neighborhood concerns. As he rounded the corner onto Hobart Boulevard, something unusual caught his attention. A small, tawny-colored form moving in his peripheral vision. At first, he assumed it was a stray cat, perhaps one of the many that wandered the urban landscape of Los Angeles. But as he paused to look more closely, his trained eye quickly recognized that this was no ordinary feline. The animal was a bobcat cub, probably no more than 3 or 4 months old based on its size. Its fur was a beautiful mixture of russet and cream, marked with the distinctive spots that would fade as it matured. But what struck Mercado most was not the cub's appearance. It was its behavior. Instead of fleeing at the sight of a uniformed human, the little bobcat sat calmly about 10 feet away, regarding him with large amber eyes that seemed far too knowing for such a young creature. Mercado had grown up in East Los Angeles, where his grandmother had filled his childhood with stories about the natural world. She'd always said that animals could sense the goodness in people, and perhaps that was why this little one didn't seem afraid. He slowly crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Where's your mama, little guy?" he whispered softly. To his amazement, the cub took a tentative step forward, then another. Mercado remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Wildlife wasn't uncommon in Los Angeles. The city's proximity to mountains and canyons meant that coyotes, deer, and occasionally mountain lions made their way into urban areas. But bobcats were typically more elusive, and a cub this young should never be alone. When Mercado slowly stood and began walking again, he discovered something extraordinary. The cub followed him. Not aggressively or frantically, but with a deliberate, purposeful gait that suggested the little animal had chosen Mercado as its guide. Mercado keyed his radio. "Tavera, you need to see this." "What's your location, Mercado?" "Hobart Boulevard, near 6th. "And bring the camera." Officer Tavera arrived within minutes, pulling the patrol car to the curb. As she stepped out, her eyes widened at the sight of Mercado standing motionless while a bobcat cub sat mere feet away, patiently watching the two officers. "Please tell me you're not planning to pet that thing," Tavera said, though she was already reaching for her phone to document the extraordinary scene. "I'm not planning anything," Mercado replied quietly. "But I think this little one needs our help." The cub appeared healthy at first glance, but a more careful observation revealed telling signs of distress. Its ribs were slightly visible through its fur, suggesting it hadn't eaten well in days. Its eyes, while alert, carried a certain weariness that seemed wrong for such a young animal. Most telling of all was its willingness to approach humans, a behavior that suggested either illness or desperation. As Tavera filmed, Mercado began to walk slowly down the sidewalk. True to form, the cub followed, maintaining a careful distance but never letting the officer out of sight. They made an unusual procession, a uniformed police officer leading an unofficial parade of one very determined bobcat cub. "This is unreal," Tavera murmured, still recording. "In 12 years on the force, I've never seen anything like this." Mercado paused at the corner, looking back at their small follower. The cub had stopped as well, sitting with remarkable patience as if waiting for further instructions. Something about the scene tugged at Mercado's heart. Perhaps it was the way the animal looked at him with such trust. Or maybe it was the obvious vulnerability of a wild creature so young and alone in an urban environment. "We need to call wildlife services," Tavera suggested, though she continued filming the remarkable interaction. "Agreed, but first I think we need to get this little guy somewhere safe." The next challenge was safely transporting a wild animal that, despite its small size and apparent friendliness, was still unpredictable. Mercado retrieved a thick blanket from the patrol car's emergency kit while Tavera contacted the appropriate authorities. "LA Animal Services says they can meet us at the Mid-City Police Station," she reported, "and they're sending someone from a wildlife rehabilitation center." Mercado approached the cub slowly, speaking in the same gentle tone he used with frightened victims. "Okay, little friend, we're going to help you find your family." To everyone's surprise, when Mercado gently scooped the cub up in the blanket, it didn't struggle or cry out. Instead, it seemed to settle into the fabric with something resembling relief, as if it had been waiting for exactly this kind of intervention. The ride to the station was surreal. The cub, now nicknamed Hobart, after the street where they'd found him, remained calm in the back seat, occasionally making small chirping sounds that Mercado found surprisingly endearing. "You know," Tavera said as they drove, "my grandmother always said that when wild animals seek help from humans, it's either a sign of great trust or great desperation. I think with Hobart here, it might be both." At the station, they were met by Dr. Jennifer Laura from the Downtown Wildlife Sanctuary, a woman whose passion for animal rescue was evident in every aspect of her demeanor. She approached the patrol car with practiced calm, carrying a specialized carrier designed for small wildlife. "I've been doing this for 15 years, she said as Mercado carefully transferred Hobart to her care. "But I've never heard of a bobcat cub actively following a human like that. Something about his behavior suggests he may have had some positive human contact early in life." Dr. Laura conducted a preliminary examination right there in the station parking lot. Her findings were both concerning and hopeful. Hobart was indeed underweight, probably 70% of what he should be for his age. He showed signs of dehydration and had clearly been fending for himself for at least a week, possibly longer. The good news, Doctor, Laura explained, is that he's essentially healthy. No injuries, no obvious signs of disease. He's just a lost baby who needs proper care and feeding. What about his mother? Mercado asked, the question that had been weighing on his mind. Bobcat mothers are incredibly devoted. For a cub this young to be wandering the streets alone. She paused, meeting Mercado's eyes. We'll search the area, but the reality is that something likely happened to her. Car strikes are unfortunately common. As Dr. Laura prepared to leave with Hobart, Mercado felt an unexpected reluctance to say goodbye. In just a few hours, this small, wild creature had somehow worked its way into his thoughts. Perhaps it was the way Hobart had trusted him, or the sense that they had formed an unlikely connection in those moments on Hobart Boulevard. Would it be possible to know how he's doing? Mercado asked. Dr. Laura smiled. We have volunteer programs at the sanctuary. If you're interested, you could help with his care. Mercado exchanged glances with Tavera, who was grinning. I think that's the first time I've seen you get attached to anything other than your abuela's tamales. That evening, Mercado found himself researching bobcats on his home computer. He learned that they were solitary creatures, typically weighing between 15 and 35 pounds when fully grown. They were excellent climbers and swimmers, primarily nocturnal, and their diet consisted mainly of rabbits, birds, and small rodents. What surprised him most was learning that bobcats were native to California and that their populations in urban areas had been growing as development encroached on their natural habitats. The next day was Mercado's day off, but he found himself driving to the downtown wildlife sanctuary. The facility was larger than he'd expected, with outdoor enclosures designed to replicate natural habitats. Dr. Laura met him at the entrance. He's been asking about you, she said with a smile. Asking about me? Bobcat cubs make specific vocalizations when they're looking for something, or someone. Ever since yesterday, little Hobart has been making those sounds whenever he hears a male voice. She led Mercado to a spacious enclosure where Hobart was currently resting under a wooden platform. When he saw Mercado, the cub immediately perked up, making the chirping sounds Dr. Laura had described. Remarkable, she murmured. I've never seen anything quite like this bond. Over the following weeks, Mercado became a regular volunteer at the sanctuary. He learned to prepare Hobart's specialized formula, to clean his enclosure, and to provide the enrichment activities that would help the cub develop natural behaviors. Dr. Laura explained that the goal was always to prepare wildlife for eventual release back into their natural habitat. However, she added during one of Mercado's visits, Hobart's case is unusual. His imprinting on humans, combined with his early separation from his mother, means he may never develop the fear response necessary for survival in the wild. As autumn progressed into winter, Hobart grew stronger and more playful. He had gained the weight he needed and showed all the signs of a healthy young bobcat. But his attachment to Mercado never wavered. When other volunteers approached his enclosure, Hobart was polite but disinterested. When Mercado arrived, the young bobcat would race to the fence, purring in a way that bobcats rarely did. You know, Dr. Laura said one December afternoon, we've been discussing Hobart's long-term placement. Mercado looked up from where he was preparing Hobart's afternoon meal. Oh? The California Department of Fish and Wildlife has reviewed his case. Given his unique circumstances and the unlikely possibility of successful release, they're considering permanent sanctuary placement. And what does that mean for him? It means he'll live out his life in a protected environment, contributing to education and conservation efforts. But more importantly for you, it means he'll need a primary caretaker, someone he's bonded with who can ensure his well-being. Mercado felt his heart skip. Are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes, despite all our best efforts and intentions, nature has its own plans. Hobart chose you, Mercado, and now you get to choose whether you want to officially be part of his life. The process was extensive. Mercado underwent training in wildlife care, learned about proper nutrition and veterinary needs, and studied the legal requirements for caring for a permanently placed wild animal. He had to modify his backyard to meet sanctuary standards, installing proper fencing and creating an environment that would stimulate Hobart's natural behaviors while keeping him safe. Officer Tavera, who had remained fascinated by the story, helped document Hobart's progress through photos and videos that the LAPD shared on social media. The story of the Bobcat cub who followed a police officer had captured the attention of people across the country, becoming a symbol of the unexpected connections that could form between humans and wildlife. 6 months after that first meeting on Hobart Boulevard, Mercado stood in his transformed backyard, watching Hobart explore his new permanent home. The young Bobcat had grown into a magnificent animal, sleek and powerful, but still unmistakably the same creature who had chosen to trust a uniformed stranger on a Los Angeles street. You know what's funny? Mercado said to Tavera, who had come to witness Hobart's official homecoming. I became a police officer to protect and serve the community. I never imagined that would include a bobcat. Maybe, Tavera replied, photographing Hobart as he investigated a new climbing structure. The community is bigger than we thought. As evening approached, Mercado sat on his porch, watching Hobart settle down for the night. The Bobcat had claimed a favorite spot on a high platform where he could survey his domain. Occasionally, he would look toward Mercado and make that same chirping sound. The one Dr. Laura said meant he was content. Mercado thought about the series of small choices that had led to this moment. The decision to walk instead of drive that Tuesday morning. The choice to stop and observe rather than hurry past. The willingness to open his heart to an unlikely friendship. Hobart's story, Dr. Laura had explained to the reporters who came to cover their unusual partnership, reminds us that conservation isn't just about preserving habitats or protecting species in the abstract. Sometimes it's about recognizing the individual connections that form between humans and wildlife. Connections that teach us as much about ourselves as they do about the animals we share this world with. Now, as stars appeared in the Los Angeles sky, Mercado understood what she meant. He had set out that morning to protect and serve his human community. Instead, he had discovered that community was larger and more interconnected than he'd ever imagined. Hobart would never return to the wild, but he would live a full, rich life as an ambassador for his species, helping humans understand the bobcats that shared their urban environment. And Mercado would continue his patrols through the neighborhoods of Los Angeles, but with a broader understanding of who and what he was serving. Sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come not from the goals we set or the plans we make, but from the moment we choose to stop and pay attention to the unexpected. For Mercado, that moment came when a small, wild creature on Hobart Boulevard decided that a uniformed police officer looked like someone who might help. In the quiet of his backyard sanctuary, watching Hobart settle into peaceful sleep, Mercado knew that some of the best decisions he'd ever made were the ones he'd never planned to make at all. And somewhere in the city, other officers continued their patrols, perhaps a little more aware of the wild hearts that shared their urban landscape, and a little more open to the possibility that life's most meaningful connections could come from the most unexpected encounters. The story of Officer Mercado and Hobart became a beloved tale throughout Los Angeles and beyond. But for Mercado, it was never really about fame or attention. It was about recognizing that in a world that often felt disconnected and harsh, moments of genuine trust and compassion could still emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. And every evening, as he watched Hobart settle into his sanctuary, Mercado was reminded that sometimes the best way to serve and protect involves opening your heart to life in all its forms, even when that life comes in the shape of a small, determined bobcat cub who simply refused to let a kind officer walk away alone. The bond between Officer Mercado and Hobart the bobcat would endure for years to come, a testament to the idea that family doesn't always look the way we expect it to, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simple decision to care about the vulnerable creatures with whom we share this world. In a city of millions, where wildlife and urban life intersected in countless ways each day, their story became a beacon of hope, proof that even in the most unlikely circumstances, compassion could bridge the gap between species, and that sometimes the most important calls we answer are the ones that come not from our radios, but from the silent plea in a pair of amber eyes that simply ask for someone to care. As Mercado often told the schoolchildren who visited Hobart at the sanctuary, sometimes the best thing you can do is just stop and listen. You never know what or who might be following you, hoping you'll notice they need your help. And in the years that followed, whenever people asked Mercado about the day he met Hobart, he would smile and say, "I thought I was just walking my beat. I had no idea I was walking toward the most important partnership of my life." For in the end, the story of the bobcat cub who followed an officer wasn't just about rescue. It was about the unexpected families we create when we choose to remain open to the magic that exists just around the corner, waiting for someone caring enough to notice, brave enough to help, and wise enough to understand that love takes many forms in this vast, interconnected world we all call home.